Three things every parent needs to know when your teen is refusing to go to school. You can imagine the morning everything falls apart. There's a particular kind of panic that kind of happens at around 7:45ish when your teenager tells you that they're not going to go to school today. You know the one. Uniform's probably still on the floor, the bag's still sitting by the front door. You know that bus is due and it's going to leave in 20 minutes. You've already asked them to get up a fair few times, and now they're either still in bed or they're locked in the bathroom. You can hear them crying or shouting, or maybe they're telling you that they feel sick. And you're standing outside that bedroom thinking, what on earth am I supposed to do now? Because this isn't just, oh, I don't fancy going to school today. You know this feels different. They're genuinely distressed. You can see it. But at the same time, your own brain is going into overdrive. They're going to miss school. What are we going to tell the school? What about attendance? What if they stay home today and then they refuse to go again tomorrow? Oh, what if all this makes this worse? What if I'm being too soft? What if I'm being too hard? And somewhere in amongst all of that, you're probably thinking, oh, I just need to get them out of the door. And I completely understand that. Because when you're looking at the clock and your teenager's upstairs refusing to move, it's very difficult to think about anything other than getting them into school. So let's take a typical morning. Your teenager's been getting increasingly worried about school. I don't know, maybe you've seen they've got a bit quieter or they've started complaining every time they step back in the door. Maybe they're teeing you up with they think they've got a headache coming or their stomach doesn't feel quite right. Or maybe in your house, Sunday evenings have just become really difficult. They're sleeping a bit worse. Or maybe they're saying that they don't actually want to go. They're telling you really how much they hate it. And you've been hoping that once they're actually back in there, well, maybe it'll all be okay again. Maybe this will all just blow over. Except that dreaded morning comes one day and they don't get out of the door. They're sitting on the bathroom floor, they're crying, or they're saying their stomach hurts. You say, come on, you need to get dressed. They say, I can't. And you say, oh, you can. And they come back with, I can't. And suddenly now you're arguing. You're looking at the clock, they're looking at you, and no one is listening to anyone. And this is where I want to stop the story for a minute. Because if this is happening in your house, I want you to know something really, really important. At this moment in your house, at this point in the morning, I cannot stress enough that this is not the moment to win the argument. This is the moment where you, as their parent, need to work out what on earth is actually going on. And that doesn't mean letting them stay home forever. And it doesn't mean saying school doesn't matter. And this doesn't even mean giving up on attendance. And it definitely doesn't mean that every time your teenager says they're anxious, the answer is to just say, okay, you don't have to go in. What it means is recognizing that you've reached a point this morning where something isn't working. And I promise you, shouting louder usually is not going to make it work out. This is the final episode today of Back to School Survival Guide. In episode 1, we looked at what you can do before school starts, because school can begin in your teenager's head way before they walk back through those gates. In episode 2, we had a look at what happens when they're worried about going back, particularly around things like friendships and how easily we can jump in and try and fix all these things for our teenager. And actually, how they're probably more than capable of handling this themselves. And that's something we need to recognise. And if you haven't listened to those episodes yet, go back, have a listen. They'll give you a bigger picture of what we're going to talk about today. But today we're talking about that moment when all that preparation just hasn't been enough. That moment when your teenager says, I'm not going in today. I can't go in. And you're standing there thinking, okay, what do I actually do now? Because this is where parents can feel completely lost. And I don't want to give you a load of theory. I want to give you 3 things you can actually do. 3 things to think about when the morning has gone completely off the rails, shall we say. And sorry, but the first one is probably the hardest. The first one is to stop trying to win the morning. I know this sounds ridiculous when your teenager's upstairs refusing to go to school, because you're probably thinking, well, someone needs to get them there. And you're right, school does matter, attendance matters. I am not suggesting for 1 minute that you just shrug your shoulders and say, okay, yeah, go on, get back into bed. But when you're in that moment, when your teenager is completely and utterly overwhelmed and they're arguing harder than usual, you biting back doesn't get you any closer to that school gate. Actually, what it does is it just gets you both more worked up. And this is where I think parents can get caught out in a really horrible cycle. And trust me, I think this because I've seen it through my work, but also because I've been here as well. You may well remember the eyelashes situation from episode 1. Usually these things sort of play out a bit like this. Your teenager says, I can't do this. And you say, yes, you can. They say, I can't. And you say, you can. You've got to. They look at you and barefacedly say, I can't. And now you're saying things you didn't intend to. You're going to have to get over this. You can't just keep missing school. Everyone else is managing to go. What are you going to do when you're an adult and something overwhelms you? And perhaps the one that comes out when you're really desperate, I'm not having this argument with you again. Or in my case, the completely awful, get out of the house. And it's totally understandable why. Because we're scared. You were scared. You're looking at your teenager and you're thinking, if I let this happen, what's going to happen tomorrow? And if I let them stay home today, am I just making it harder for tomorrow? And that fear, it just makes us push harder. But honestly, sometimes when your teenager is already at the point where they genuinely cannot get out of the door, the first job isn't then getting them to the door. The first job is understanding what's made that door feel so impossible. And it's a really important difference to understand. So if you're standing outside that bedroom or the bathroom and things are starting to escalate, try changing the goal in your head. Don't make the goal you are getting to school. Make the goal, we need to work out what's happening. You might say things like, I can see you're really struggling this morning. I'm not going to stand here and shout at you. Let's work out what's going on. Or even forget the clock for a minute. Tell me what's making this feel so hugely impossible. Notice that I'm not saying, okay, you don't have to go. I'm not saying school doesn't matter. And I'm not saying just stay at home. I'm saying, let's understand this problem before we decide what we're going to do about it. Because there can be massive differences between a teenager who doesn't want to go to school and a teenager who genuinely feels unable to go. And from the outside, I promise, both those things can look so similar. One might be lying under a duvet saying, I'm not going. And the other might be lying under a duvet saying, I'm not going. But what's happening underneath could be completely different. Maybe something happened with a friend. Maybe they're terrified about seeing somebody at school, or maybe there's an assessment that they haven't prepared for. They could be exhausted, or they might be worried about a particular lesson that's happening that day. Maybe they're holding it together for weeks and now they're simply run out of capacity to do that. Or maybe they don't even know why. Sometimes I can't go is the only way a teenager can explain that something just doesn't feel right. Something isn't manageable anymore. And this is where your calm is really going to matter. And don't get me wrong, I'm not talking perfect calm. I'm definitely not suggesting that you go sit there serenely drinking your coffee while your teenager's having a total meltdown upstairs. You might be absolutely panicking inside. I would be. Well, in fact, I was, and I have. But you can choose what you do with that panic. Because if you come in shouting, "Get dressed, we're leaving now," and your teenager is already overwhelmed, you now got two people in crisis. You don't need to become that second person in crisis in this moment. You can be the person who brings the temperature down. Even if you're thinking, "I've got absolutely no friggin' idea what I'm doing here," you can lower your voice. You can sit down. You can stop repeating the same thing over and over. You can give them a minute and say things like, "Right, do you know what? We're not sorting out the whole week and the whole issue with school right now. We're just going to work out what's happening this morning, today." That is not giving in. That's just changing your conversation. And if you really do need to get them into school, you're so much more likely to make that happen when you're both actually able to think. Because here's the thing, you can't argue someone out of feeling overwhelmed. You can help create enough space for them to start working out what they need. And that will then bring us to the second thing that's super important in these situations. Because once you stop trying to win the morning, you've got a much more useful question to answer now. So number 2 is work out what "I can't go" actually means. Because it's such a massive statement. And as a parent, it's really easy to hear that and think, "Oh no, school refusal. How do we stop this? What are we going to do?" But before you start trying to fix it, you need to understand what you're actually dealing with. Because "I can't go" can mean a lot of different things. Like I said earlier, they could be worried about seeing someone, having not done the homework and going to get in trouble when they get in. They don't know where they're supposed to be going. They've got a lesson today they don't like. Something happened yesterday. They're worried about people talking about them. They haven't slept. They're exhausted. Their stomach actually really does hurt. They've been holding everything together for weeks and now they just can't do today. Or maybe they just don't know how to explain that something's wrong. And that's why I don't want you to turn into an investigator at 7:45 a.m. in the morning. You don't need to sit there asking, "Why? Yeah, but why? But why? What's happened? Who said what? Are you being bullied? Is it the teacher? Is it your friends?" Because if your teenager is already overwhelmed, this will feel nothing short of an interrogation. And you're probably going to get, "I don't know," followed by a very quick slam of the door. So instead, the second thing for you to do is keep it simple. Say things like, "Is it getting out of the house that's the hard bit, or is it getting into school that's worrying you?" It's quite useful because it gives them two things to choose between. And trust me, if neither of them is true for your teen, they are going to tell you it's nothing to do with that. Maybe you can try something like, "Is there something that's happened? Or does everything just feel like it's a bit too much today?" Or, "What's the bit you're most worried about?" Maybe even you'd say, "Do you know what would make today feel a tiny bit easier?" And if they don't know, that's okay. You don't have to get the full answer before breakfast. You might simply say something like, "That's okay. We don't have to work it all out right now." Because sometimes your teenager just genuinely doesn't know, or they're still feeling massively overwhelmed and can't think straight. All that they do know right in this moment, in that morning, is that they can't do it. And that information really matters too. Now, here's where I think we can really help teenagers with anxiety. We don't need to make their anxiety disappear. We need to help them break it down. Because, as I've said, "I can't go to school" is one huge statement. But "I can't face walking into the dining hall," that's something we can think about. "I can't see that person today. I can't look them in the face." Okay, now we've got somewhere to start. I don't know where I'm supposed to be going when I get there. Okay, that's actually a problem we probably can solve. I can't manage a whole day today. Again, maybe we need to think about whether there's a smaller step that can be taken first. And this is where number 3 comes in, which can be that taking any help you can get really does matter. And this is where working with school can be important, because sometimes the answer isn't something that can be fixed from home. And please don't feel like you failed if you can't fix it at home. Firstly, remember, you probably shouldn't be fixing things anyway. But secondly, the reason parenting teenagers is so hard is because their world is bigger than just you now. And there are so many areas that you've got no influence or involvement over. And that's not a reflection on your parenting. You're their parent. You're not the school. You don't need to know exactly what the school can offer. You don't need to know every pastoral policy of the school. You don't need to know what a reduced timetable could look like. You don't even need to know whether there is somewhere quiet where they can go. All of this is the school's job to help you work out. Your job is just to say, this is what I'm seeing at home. And this is the third thing I want to talk about. Please don't try and manage this on your own. You don't need to. And sometimes the answer lies with someone else. You would tell your teen to speak up if something wasn't right. So take your own advice and take all the help and support you can get for your teenager. So you have one bad morning and then there's another. Then you start thinking, it's okay, we'll sort this. So you negotiate. You bribe, you threaten, you let them stay home because they're clearly struggling. Then you feel guilty because they're staying at home. And then now the next morning comes and you're terrified that all this is going to happen again. And suddenly you're now managing school attendance, your teenager's anxiety, your own anxiety, work, siblings, getting everyone out of the house. And all of this is from the kitchen at 8 a.m. That is such a lot for any parent to carry. So if you can take support from others, seriously, do it. And I don't mean sending an angry email saying something needs to be done about this. I mean, maybe bringing the school into the picture as early as you can. One slight caveat to consider here is to give some consideration to your team with this. The idea here is that you guys are a team, and maybe more team members can make it a stronger team. But be prepared. Your teenager may not want the school to be involved. I'm not saying that means you shouldn't involve them. I'm asking that you recognise this, understand why, and make the appropriate choice as a parent, as an adult. Make a deal, or maybe you can work out a compromise that shows that if getting help is needed, it is what you're going to do. And this is because you care. And because you've understood what the actual problem is. So any reinforcements that are brought in will also understand in any support they give. And when approaching school, you'll know the best way in. You know that school. So things to think about saying, you could say, we're struggling to get them into school at the moment. They're becoming increasingly distressed about going in. And we're not managing to resolve this at home. So can we work on a plan together? That's just enough that will start a conversation. And then you get to ask some really practical questions. Firstly, any questions that your teen has identified as important. You will pick these up in step 2. And then you can ask things that you feel are important as well. So things like, who's a person that they can go to when they arrive in the morning? Where can they go if things start to become too much? What happens if they can't manage the full morning? Could someone meet them at the gate each day? Or is there a quieter way for them to come into the school? Is there somewhere they can go if break time starts to feel a bit too much? And can we agree that we all do this consistently? Honestly, that last one's really important. Consistency. Because if home says one thing, school says another, and your teenager's getting different responses from every member of staff, I tell you now, it can make an already difficult situation lots harder. So the idea is, as a team, you get as much clarity as you possibly can for your teenager. So they can be clear. This is my plan. This is who I go to. This is what happens if I struggle. This is what my mum and dad have said they're going to do. This is what the school are going to do. Because honestly, predictability can make a huge difference when anything feels uncertain. So I'll say it again. Please don't be embarrassed about contacting school if it could help. It's not admitting you failed. You're not causing a fuss, and you're not being a difficult parent. What you're saying is, my teenager's struggling, and as the key parts in my teenager's life, we need to work together here. That's what partnership is for. And honestly, I'd much rather see a parent contact school early and say, we're worried, we'd like to work together with you on this, than spend 3 weeks battling it out at home, feeling like you're failing at every moment and watching your teenager drift further and further away from you. Because this isn't supposed to be you against your teenager. And it isn't supposed to be you against school either. It's you, your teenager, and school trying to work this out. And what you're trying to work out is, how do we get this young person back to feeling able to do this? And honestly, this might not happen in one day. It might not happen in a week. And this is where you need to be careful about one of the biggest traps that parents fall into. Thinking if they stay home today, you've failed. Or if they don't manage a full day tomorrow, we failed. Or if we need to take steps backwards, we failed. Honestly, you haven't. That is simply not true. The aim is not to prove that your teenager can get through the school gates at any cost. The aim is to help them get back to a place where school feels manageable again. And sometimes that takes a plan. It takes school involvement. It takes consistency. And it takes you remembering that you're all on the same side. Which does bring me to one bit I really want to talk about before I finish this series. So far, I've given you 3 things to do. But there are actually some things, when we're panicked as parents, we kind of really easily do. And actually, they make the situation a little bit harder. And I want to talk about them without making you feel like you've got another list of things that you're getting wrong. Because if your teenager is not looking to go to school and they're refusing to go in, and you're standing at the bottom of the stairs at 8 o'clock, you're probably not thinking, let's see if I can respond to this in the most emotionally regulated way possible. What you're probably thinking is, oh my word, what on earth do I do now? So if you found yourself saying some of these things that I'm going to mention, you're not a terrible parent. You're a panicked parent. And you're in good company, because I've been here too. A panicked parent is very different from a terrible parent. So the first thing to try not to do is, don't make that morning moment a courtroom. Because when we're frightened as parents, we can start to try and present your case to your teenager. You've got to go. Well, you went in yesterday. Oh, you'll be fine once you're there. You can't keep doing this. And everyone else is managing to go. What are you going to do when you get older? This is going to mean you're going to get behind in classes, and you're going to get into trouble for not being there. And honestly, I know some of these things might actually be true, but not one of them is going to help your teenager who is already overwhelmed and is actually trying to work out what on earth they're supposed to do next. And what you're trying to do there is convince them. And what they're trying to tell you is that they can't. And suddenly here we go. We're back to arguing about whether they should be able to go, rather than understanding that right now, your teenager truly believes they can't. So instead of you going, try, school does matter. So let's work out what's making it feel impossible today. It's a completely different conversation. One of the other things to watch is, don't make school the enemy. This one's so easy to do. You might say something like, "Oh, I'd let you stay home, babe," but school will go absolutely mad. Or, "Oh, I can't believe they're making you go in when you are this upset." Or where I usually used to end up, "It's the school's fault you're so stressed out. They just put on so much pressure on you." And I understand why we say these things, why I've said these things. Because sometimes we're just trying to show our teenager that I'm on your side. I get it. But honestly, we need to be really careful with this. Because what it also does is it makes school the big scary enemy. We've potentially made the place they need to return to even more frightening than it was before. You can absolutely acknowledge that school is difficult. So I know school feels really hard at the moment. I know there are things that you're finding difficult. I want us to work with school to try and see if we can make it a bit easier. That's very different from, "Oh, school is just awful." But it's them. They're making you do this. Because ultimately, we want your teenager to feel that school is somewhere we're going to help them manage, not somewhere everyone agrees is impossible. And that may mean working with school, even when they don't agree with everything they say. The other thing to watch yourself for is don't make staying home a reward. And this one's a bit complicated because sometimes your teenager genuinely does just need to stay at home. Sometimes they aren't well or they are too overwhelmed to manage that day at school. But if staying home becomes the easiest, most comfortable part of the whole situation, you do need to bear a thought for what happens next. Because with anxiety, it's so good at saying, "Oh, don't go in today." And then tomorrow it will come back with, "Oh, definitely we can't go in. We didn't go in yesterday, so why would we have to do it today?" And before you know it, getting back through that school gate feels even bigger than it did the day before. So if they do stay home, just don't turn it into a bonus day. No, right, you're off school, so let's get Netflix on and we'll get some snacks. And equally, don't go the other way and make it a punishment day. You're not trying to make home miserable so that they want to go back. You're just trying to keep things as ordinary and predictable as possible while we're working out the next step. And if this is happening repeatedly, that's exactly why getting school involved matters. Because the answer isn't necessarily going to be found by you trying to make home more attractive or more horrible. It's going to come from understanding what is making school feel impossible and working together on that plan to get them able to feel that they can go back. And so there's one final thing I want you to avoid. Try not to make the whole day within your home about school. So say your teenager did go in one day. They managed to get themselves in for half a day and they finally come home. Try not to spend the next 6 hours asking questions like, "So, do you think you're going to be going in tomorrow? Have you had any thoughts about tomorrow and school? Do you think you're going to be able to do that? Have you messaged in with your teacher, or have you spoken to any of your friends? So what are you going to do? What's going to happen tomorrow?" Now, I know we all know why we're doing it. It's because we're terrified about tomorrow. But your teenager really seriously needs some time where they're just your teenager again. So, I don't know, watch something, walk the dog, eat something together, play a game, get them to help with dinner, talk about something completely unrelated. And I'm not saying pretend the problem doesn't exist, but you also don't need to make the problem the centre of absolutely everything. And then, maybe if things get a bit calmer, then that's when you can talk about it. Never in the middle of a battle. Not at 7:45 a.m. with one shoe on. Do it when everybody can actually think. Because sometimes the most useful conversation about going to school happens after the crisis. It very rarely happens during it. And that's something I really want you to try and remember. the morning might be where that crisis happens, but it isn't necessarily going to be where you solve it. So before we finish, let's bring these 3 things together. Because if you've listened to this in the middle of a really difficult time at school, I don't want you to have to remember a whole podcast. I want you to remember 3 simple things. Number 1, stop trying to win the morning. If your teenager is completely overwhelmed, shouting louder, threatening consequences, or getting into a battle with them about who's right, I promise you is not going to get you any closer to solving the problem. Bring the temperature down. You can be clear that school matters without it turning into a fight. Something as simple as, right, we're not going to sort out the whole school year this morning. Let's just work out what's happening now. Number 2, find out what's actually happening now. Find out what I can't go actually means. Don't assume. Don't diagnose. Don't immediately jump in with a solution. Just ask a simple question. What's the bit that's feeling hardest today? Or is it getting out of the house? Or is it getting into school? And if they don't know, then that's okay. You don't have to solve the whole thing before 8 a.m. Things like, what do you think you could do right now? What do you think would help? And if they don't know, give them the space to try and work out what that is. I don't know is as much as saying to you, I need some space to think. So give them the opportunity. Number 3, don't try to manage it on your own. You can get school involved. Just tell them what you're seeing. Ask if there's someone your teenager can go to. Ask what happens when they get in. Ask if there is support available. And most importantly, agree on a plan that everyone understands and everyone can stick to. Because consistency really will matter with anxiety. Your teenager needs to know what's happening next. And so do you, let's be honest. And there's one more thing I just want to sneak in there quickly. Please don't turn this into another thing you're going to judge yourself on. If you've already shouted, if you've already threatened, if you've already said you are going to school whether you like it or not, if you've stood at the bottom of the stairs completely losing your mind because you've got no idea what to do and you shouted, just get out of the house, like I did, you are not a terrible parent. You're a parent who's scared. And when we're scared for our kids, sometimes we just don't behave how we like to. And that doesn't mean that your relationship with your teenager is broken. You can go back. You can apologise. You can say, I was worried this morning and I know I didn't handle it very well. I'm sorry. And then you try again. That's parenting teenagers. We just don't get it right every time. And as I've shown you, I certainly don't either. And actually, that's one of the biggest things I hope you take from this whole series. You don't need to become the perfect parent who always says the right thing. You just need to become the parent who's willing to notice what's actually happening and think about it differently, and then go back and try again. Because your teenager doesn't need you to make every difficult thing disappear. I mean, hopefully by now, have you listened to a few of these and are realising that actually that's a really unhelpful thing to do? They need to know that when things do get difficult, that you're still there. And sometimes that means helping them through the front door. But sometimes it means giving them space. Sometimes it means getting school involved. And sometimes it means saying, I don't know how we're going to start this yet, but you know what? We'll work it out. And sometimes it means admitting, oh, I've got that totally wrong. And just starting again. And so that brings us to the end of our back to school survival guide. Just a blip in the ocean of things that may well help you if you're in any of these situations we've discussed. We've gone from the weeks before school starts, where your teenager might already be worrying about what's coming, to just before those first few days back, when friendships, new classes, and that massive unknown can just feel enormous. And now to the mornings when the worries become too big and your teenager says, I'm not going. And I think there's a thread running through all of these episodes, and that's the relationship, the connection that you have. In episode 1, we talked about protecting it. Episode 2, we talked about trusting your teenager rather than automatically fixing things for them. And here in episode 3, we're talking about staying alongside them when things become really difficult. Because underneath all of this, your teenager needs to know you're not on your own with this. Not, I'll fix everything, don't worry, it'll be fine. Not, I'll make sure nothing difficult ever happens. Just, I'm here and we'll work this out. And if you're dealing with difficulty with getting into school right now, please don't suffer in silence. Talk to the school or talk to someone you trust. Get some support, because you don't have to have all the answers before you ask for help. And if this isn't your family right now, but maybe you know another parent who's struggling with a teenager who just doesn't want to go in, please share this series with them. They might need to hear it on a Tuesday morning when they're standing at the bottom of the stairs wondering what on earth they're supposed to do. If you've listened to all 3 episodes, thank you. I genuinely love to know what you thought. Has it been useful? Have I missed anything? What are you dealing with at home that maybe you'd like me to talk about instead? Please send me your questions or give me your feedback and tell me what you'd like to hear in future episodes. If you found this podcast useful, please follow or subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And also it lets me know that there are people out there who are listening. If you'd like more practical help understanding your teenager, don't forget my book that's out there called Don't Panic. It's Just a Teenager. It's out there on Amazon as well. It's full of the everyday things I've learned from working with teenagers. And more importantly, from being a parent of teenagers too. Because sometimes we don't need another parenting rule. We just need someone to help us see what's going on from our teenagers' side of the door. Thanks for listening and have a cracking day.